5-minute meals, the show where basically we try to make a meal under $5. This is basically for anyone who would like a nice, good home-cooked meal, but doesn't feel like spending lots of money. It's honestly really relatable. And today we'll be making chicken soup. Technically not chicken noodle soup because like there are no noodles, but there are dumplings, so I guess chicken dumpling soup also works per se. And I would like to clarify how these $5 meals works. I'm basically giving you a bare bones-ish type version of how to make these things. I will also be giving lots of feedback for things you can switch out for if you want to spend less money, or switch or put things in if you want to spend more money. This is just how I've decided to make it, and this usually works for me. Now when it comes to chicken soup, I've basically begun creating this in the past year or so I'm generally new to this, but I do think this recipe works pretty well for someone who will want something very flavorful. I'll be teaching you how to make a stock, how to cook the chicken, how to make dumplings for it, everything. I got all my ingredients at Walmart, but you can also get them from local markets if you have them nearby, or any other stores, although I chose Walmart because they typically have cheaper-ish prices. And so yes, let's begin. The basic things you need if you want to spend like a smallest amount of money possible is carrots. I chose whole carrots that you have to like peel the rind off of because they're the cheapest ones, and I like doing the work for it. 2, celery. Usually when it comes to these type of things, I think the proper term is mirepoix, which is like French, which kind of just stands for something that has onions, carrots, and celery, which is basically the 3 main veggies you'll need. So I also got celery. I got a lot of celery. I'm not a huge celery person, but if you are, just get a lot of celery. It's good for other things too. I don't know what else, but it's good for other things. And I also got a single onion, and this is basically again part of the mirepoix. What else I got other than these, which cost me about, I think we're at about $3-4 at this rate. And I also got a young chicken, which I think was about like $2. I don't fully remember, but I really like the young chicken because it's like a good enough size where you can split it apart for different meals. What I like to do for this is I only use part of the chicken now, and then I save the rest later. So technically, if you cut off like the parts that you're saving later, then this meal still kind of goes under $5. And if you don't want to use the young chicken because you think it's too expensive, I recommend a Cornish hen. They are like much smaller, but they are like a full $1 cheaper, so you could really have like this full $5 meal experience. Serving size for this, you should be able to at least have like 2 full like meals worth of soup. Realistically, probably more. I feel like I can make this last like 4 days if I really wanted to. Anything left over you could put in the fridge, and if you have any leftover broth that you don't want, you can always save that, freeze it, use it for later. I usually like saving my roasted chicken fat and putting it on vegetables when I'm roasting them. Just adds another layer of flavor because we're all about saving flavors here. And another thing you can do with it, if you feel like there's too much stock left over, you can always save that for later, use it for other things, or use it for soup again. It's all debatable. One thing I like about doing a lot of these like meals full on, like from the base level, is there's so many different steps you can incorporate or save, and just like so many more options for like keeping these different little flavor bombs hidden for other dishes you might have. A few other things you'll need is you'll definitely need shears, a knife. I recommend a really, really good knife. Patience, because you're about to like carve a chicken, so you're gonna need some patience. Cutting board. You're going to be using your oven and your stove for both of these, and this entire meal should take about 2 hours, but there's a lot of waiting time in between. So let's say if you wanted to get the chicken in the oven and do some homework, I highly recommend that. That's probably what I'm going to do while I'm making this too, so don't worry, we're all in there together. And now that I think everything's set, let's get started with the actual cooking, shall we? So the ingredients you will be needing for this step are your carrots, your onion, and your bunch of celery. But first we're going to start off with our carrots. So we're going to be using a potato peeler and basically peel off the skin off these carrots because they're dirty, because they were in the, ground. If you don't have a potato peeler, a knife works just as well. We're doing this because the skin around it is filthy, basically. It's not filthy in a way that you can just clean it off, so I would just recommend getting rid of it in general. So now that we finished peeling our first carrot, we will be using our knife to cut off the tops and throw them away, and our bottoms, and also we will be throwing those away. We're going to be doing the same thing with the second carrot. So now these 2 carrots will be used for our stew. We're just going to chop them up into like large, vaguely manageable pieces. Don't worry if it takes a little while or you're struggling a bit, you'll get the hang of it. So we're just going to chop them up into vaguely manageable sizes. And we're going to eventually throw all of that into our bowl that we're just going to designate our soup bowl. So with this carrot, this is going to actually be used particularly for the veggies for our soup. I'm peeling it just like I did the others. Then I'm going to cut the tops and ends off this one as well. Now this one I'm not going to just chop the same way. I'm going to make sure that this one is chopped in manageable bite-sized pieces. So I'm cutting the larger pieces in half like that. That way they're also easy cut, and then I'm just going to cut them into semicircles and throw all of that into our veggie bowl. So now we have our onion. We're going to be putting all of the outer layer of the onion skins into our bowl. Now you can also use this bowl for compost if you don't feel comfortable throwing all of this away. Now that we're done with that, we're going to cut it in half. As you can see, I'm struggling a bit, but everyone struggles sometimes when cutting onions. And I am cutting it in this way because the grain from like both sides make it easier to cut when you're eventually putting the onion horizontal. So I'm going to briefly cut these in half, and then I'm going to peel the skin off each. An easy way to do this is by you cutting both ends off the onion first before you peel, and we're just going to throw those away into our compost bin, and we're just going to peel off the layers of skin until we both have 2 pearly white onion halves. So now that we have that, what we're going to do is split this one in half and cut it in larger chunks, because this one is just going to be used to flavor our broth. So the uniformity in size of the chunks doesn't matter. I prefer bigger ones because it makes it easier to fish out later. In fact, I would even recommend going bigger than what I'm doing here. And we're going to put all of this into our soup bowl, basically, where all our veggies will be going to cook into the broth. With our second onion, that's going to be for our veggies. I want to cut them in manageable sizes. So how I do this is I cut vertical slits across the entire onion one way. Oops, we messed up, so we're just going to put that back real quick. And then I'm going to cut horizontally this way. That way, due to the grain, you get very small pieces that are also easy to separate. Now I'm also going to do a finer chop of them because I want them to be small and very much edible. So we're going to put these quickly in our veggie bowl. And the last one's going in. So next we're going to work on our celery. And what we're going to end up doing is cut off 2, or more like rip off 2 stalks off of this. The rest you can save later for another time. And you see the white edges, we don't really want that because it's kind of fibrous and woody. So I'm just going to chop both ends off for each of these stalks. After that, we're going to cut off the tops off both of them too. I'm not a huge fan of the leaf parts of celery, so I'm just going to throw that away. Please find a way to use it if you want to. And I'm doing the same off this one as well because the end's kind of dirty. So we'll be using a stalk and a half basically for our broth. So I'm just chopping these into like large pieces. I'm cutting a few in half that I feel like might benefit better that way, and I'm just throwing them all in there. Then for our celery, we're going to split this one in half. Again, I'm using half of the stalk for our broth. And then the other half, I'm just going to chop into small pieces. I'm not a huge fan of celery, so I don't want a lot of it in here. But it does help with not only with flavor, but gives it a nice crunch at the end. So we're scooping all of that into there. So we have our bowl now full of veggies that will be going in later on in our soup. And now we have our big bowl of vegetables that will be flavoring our broth. So here's our little chicken. Woo! I'm sorry, I see a little flap of like bone and skin. I'm just going to cut that off and put it in the bowl where we will basically be putting all of our chicken that's going into the oven. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip the chicken backwards. We see the spine here. And the little tail, or the chicken butt as I like to call it. We're just going to cut it off and throw it in there as well. And you see I have a pair of kitchen shears, not scissors, kitchen shears, and there is a big difference. So please try to use this if possible. If you don't have it, a knife might be able to do. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually cutting the spine out of this chicken. Realistically, you could even push this step further so you could fully spatchcock a chicken, but we're not going to do that today. And as you can see, it's taking time and effort. You are cutting through bone, and sometimes a bone will catch. So it's really about just feeling the chicken around it and cutting where you need to. And as you see, we are now done. So we're going to put everything there, and we have our thigh that's already nice and loose, so we're just going to chop that off. And now we have a full leg and thigh combo. So I'm going to repeat the exact same process onto the other side of the chicken. And yes, it's not fully easy, but we get it done. And so here we have a wing. Now this wing took me a second. I had to feel around the joints to know exactly where to cut. So I recommend that if you are having trouble, don't be afraid to get in there. And now we have a wing, and I just cut off the second one. So now we're focusing just on the breast. What I'm going to do for here is I'm going to cut one completely off and leave the other one on the bone. With the one that is off the bone, that will be cooked directly into our broth. The one on the bone will end up being roasted with the rest of the chicken. So now that we're done, we're going to push everything and go to the oven. And the temperature I'm using here is 400. So what I'm doing here is I'm placing the chicken on a admittedly very large pan. You could use something smaller. I'd even recommend something smaller. But we're just putting all of our different parts that we found around here. Next, we're gonna put a little olive oil on it to help it get crispier faster. And then I'm gonna sprinkle salt on it. So don't worry about over salting at this step. Realistically, the chicken will be submerged in the broth eventually, which will only flavor the entire broth. So you're good. So now that we are officially done, let me get a thumbs up. There we go. We're just gonna put it in the oven. So now I am putting olive oil into my pan while the stove is on. You want to get nice and hot. And what I'm doing is I'm adding garlic to this. No, that was not part of the original recipe, and no, you don't have to add it, but if you have it, I'd recommend doing it. It's been about 20 or so minutes, so the chicken's now officially done roasting, and we're just gonna take it out. As you can see, it's slightly brown, not fully browned. I do live in a dorm, and I do not want to burn anything in here. And you see all the little dark spots around, that is fond, aka little flavor bomb. So we're gonna let all that rest. Right now the garlic is browning and we're waiting for it to fully brown. Now that it has, we're gonna be putting all of our vegetables in there. And we're just gonna mix it up. We want at least to be nicely coated in the oil we put in it. So now that it's been well coated and it's starting to turn a little brown, we're going to be putting water in here, the beginning of our official broth. It doesn't necessarily matter how much, you just want it to fill it up to a certain extent. Now what you've missed so far is because my camera cut out. I have added chicken breast from that pan and put it into my broth. I have also added water to that pan and letting the fond sit and start to blend in with the water. So everything's just boiling at this point. So things you've missed, I've added a little bit of salt and a little bit of thyme. Again, you don't have to actually put thyme in, I just recommend it if you have it around. And we're just going to continue to let it sit. So it's been a little bit, the water and fond have sat together, and it's ready to finally pour in. So you see all that liquid is going to be poured directly into it. That is basically caramelized chicken bits and water going into that. It will add so much flavor to it. It's delicious just thinking about it. So I'm going to do a quick mix in, and we're going to let this sit here for a while so all the flavors can mix together. I'm going to do a quick taste test so I know where to go about it. After tasting it, I decided that it needs some more salt, so I'm just going to add some quickly, and then we're going to mix it and then wait. So we're going to be making dumplings while that is cooking, so we're going to use about 1/3 cup of flour. The amount of flour doesn't matter nearly as much as the amount of dumplings you want to make. Right now I'm going to put 1/3 cup of flour in here and let it sit there. And I'm going to add a little bit, a pinch of salt. You want it to be slightly flavored. and then we're going to add water. Now this just becomes a test of adding the right flour to water ratio. We want the dough to end up being shaggy and sticky, but still kind of solidified. So this is a little too dry for me, so I'm going to end up adding some more water back into it. And now I've decided that it's actually a bit too wet. So it's about finding the right ratio. I will say warning, we don't want to end up continuing to add flour to water until we have much more dough than we originally intended. So please be aware of the portions you're putting in here to get the proper texture. So we want something about here. You see how it's sticking together in one piece, but it's still very, very sticky. And that's about where we want it. So at this rate, about 20 minutes have passed. We are going to take the chicken breast out of the broth. We're going to leave the bone still in there. So as you can see, all of the chicken is now out. The broth has evaporated a bit, so now we're going to shred the chicken with our forks. Now it's officially shredded. I'm pretty sure you guys didn't want to see it. So we're going to go back to our broth, and again, it's evaporated even more than. Right now it's been on the stove for about 40 minutes in total. So I'm going to call it done and take out the bones in here and all of the vegetables. At this rate, a lot of those vegetables have leached most of its flavor to the broth, so I myself am going to throw them away. If you would like to keep them or reuse them, you can use them in the broth as well if that's what you desire. Just cut it up into the proper pieces and use that as flavor anyway. Now it's time to go fishing. As you can see, we are now officially done with the broth. Everything's taken out of it. It's kind of low right now, but we're going to add more water later after we add our vegetables. I added them here so that way they still end up with a bit of a crunch when you eat them, but they're still mostly soft and cooked. So with our veggies now in, we are going to be adding our dumpling dough to it. So we're just going to pinch small pieces of it. It's really sticky, I know, and just drop them into them. Try to do them in uniform sizes if you must. I myself will recommend bigger chunks than I have here. It just depends on you. And we're just going to continue to do that off screen. We'll come back when it's done. So as you can see, the dumplings have been in here for a while, cooking through about 3 to 4 minutes. I recognize that the water level's a little low, so I'm going to raise it up, not by much. I myself love a chunky soup. If you like your soup to be looser or lighter, then please feel free to add more water. And as you can also see, I did not add all of the dough. I decided that this would be the right amount for me, but please do whatever would feel right to you. So now I'm going to add all of our shredded chicken into the soup. And now we're going to let everything sit for about 2 to 3 minutes so all the flavors can come together. And now it's basically add whatever seasoning you would like game. And for me, I am adding cayenne pepper. Not a lot, I do like a little bit of a kick. Okay, maybe a little more of a kick. And then we're going to mix it together. Now we're going to add black pepper and do a final mix. We're going to let this sit for about 2 to 3 minutes. So now it's done. There's a bit too much chicken, so I'm just going to take care of that situation. So now we're officially done with this. Woo! So as you can tell, everything's boiling. It seems to be nicely mixed in, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my spoon. And we're going to take a few spoonfuls. Again, I like my soup chunky, so there's not a lot of liquid in here, but this is how I prefer it. It's up to you at the end of the day. Just add more water in the earlier process. I'm going to add a bit more broth here, and I'm going to call that a day. Now for me, you can be fully done here if you want, but for me, I do want to add a little bit of lemon juice actually to this for acidity, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm not even using real lemons, I'm using the good old-fashioned stuff and adding just a bit here. And now we are officially done with our chicken dumpling soup. Wow, wasn't that delicious? It's not like I just recorded this after I recorded the intro at all. But either way, thank you for watching, and I hope you make this dish for yourself. While it does take time and it might seem daunting at first, I promise you it is so rewarding to be able to learn how to not only break down the chicken, but create your own stew, because this also applies to any other type of meats or realistically vegetables that you want when it comes to soups. But yeah, thank you for watching. I will be back here next month, and I hope you have a good day. Have fun cooking. Bye.